Prog rock band Haken has a brand new album coming out March 3rd called Fauna. We're going to interview Richard Henshall, co-founder of the band, right now.
In this era, it's a lot harder for progressive bands to really make a name for themselves. We collaborated a lot on this album, so each of us had a voice.
Hi.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Richard?
Very good, very good. Nice to see you.
Super. Nice to see you too. And I had a question put out to my viewers if they had questions for you. So I'm going to go through those to start with, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
The first one is from Jen. She mentioned that you were doing Cruise to the Edge. It seems like a lot of the folks there might be the fans of the older progressive rock. And she's wondering, how do the older fans react to Haken? Because you're sort of, that new generation of prog rock.
Yeah, we've been lucky enough to have been invited back to Cruise to the Edge for, I don't know, like every year basically until COVID happened. And we had maybe 2 or 3 years off due to COVID. But it's such an incredible place to play. Firstly, you're on a boat and you're overlooking the ocean and you're playing music, which is what you love doing. But the other side of it is that you could bring your family along as well. So I bring my kids. My oldest son has been there every year since he was 0 years old, and he loves it. It's part of his thing, and that's how he knows of Haken. And it's a real fun gig. Our music generally caters for a lot of people. We have the younger demographic who are maybe more into the heavier side of our music. This is obviously generalizing a lot, but then we have maybe the older demographics, which maybe latch on to the more progressive elements of our music. And I guess we fuse these two sounds together, like songs like Cockroach King or Crystallized it's almost like the marriage of bands like Gentle Giant with Meshuggah. It's like those two extremes mixed together. And I think the result of that is that we've got quite a broad fan base in terms of age. So it's a real fun gig. And yeah, we always are received very fondly on the boat.
My next question is from Arnaud B. He says, what's your desert island record?
Oh, I mean, I imagine most people would say this, but it changes from day to day or week to week, depending on my mood or depending on what I've discovered that week. Oh, it's so tricky, very tricky. But one album that really has stuck out to me over the last, say, 5 years is an album called Shadow Theatre by an artist called Tigran Hamasyan.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know that guy?
I did a react to one of his songs. Yeah, he's pretty amazing.
Oh, I'm a big fan. He basically is a jazz pianist from Armenia, and he fuses this Armenian folk music with like really heavy, dense sounding polyrhythmic riffs that he plays on the piano, which almost sounds like a guitar the way he does it. It's insane. But I love his music, and I love like the rich harmonies and the rhythms that he applies. But that album for me is just like the perfect combination of all of those elements that I really love. So I'll take that album, but I'll be missing all my other albums. So the tricky question.
Recently, you had The Cocoon. That was a solo album you put out. Gentleman 88 says that's in his top 5 overall favorite albums. And he wondered if you're planning to create any more solo albums.
Well, firstly, thank you so much. It was a real fun experience writing that album, because back in the day, I used to do a lot of the writing for Haken for the first 3 albums. But then around the Affinity era, we decided to start writing as a band and make it a lot more collaborative. So that's really when I started working on The Cocoon. It took a few years to kind of piece it together, but the whole process was very exciting and very liberal. Yeah, I mean, during that whole process, I ended up with maybe 2 albums worth of material. So I had like the follow-up almost ready. And the plan was to just go straight on and release a second offering of that album, but I never got around to it. I ended up thinking maybe it'd be better if I wrote some more jazzy instrumental stuff. So I started doing that. And then halfway through that album, I thought maybe I could do an acoustic album. Yeah, I'll try that. I tried that and I ended up with like maybe 4 or 5 different projects, which are all unfinished. So currently I have all these different things going on at the same time in tandem, which are not quite completed, but I've got to try and work out a way of, executing the actual albums and finishing them, and then working out what one I'm going to release first. But yeah, definitely going to release some more stuff in the future.
And I noticed in some bio notes that you play guitar, but also keyboards. So what's the division there? Are you more of a guitarist than a keyboardist?
Well, my musical journey started on the piano because my mum was a piano teacher. So I used to wake up at the weekends and I would hear people being taught Bach and Chopin. And that really got the musical cogs turning in my head. And that really inspired me to want to write music and want to play music. So that's where it started. So I learned the piano and I kind of dabbled in a few other things like drums and clarinet. But then I found guitar, and that's really what I kind of focused all my attention on for years, whilst obviously keeping the piano there in the background, and used it more as a tool for writing more than anything else. I always found that, the ideas that I wrote on the piano lent themselves more to harmonic, colorful sounding ideas, whereas the guitar ideas were generally more riff-based or rhythmic-based. So combining those two together really formed the overall sound that encompasses the music I write. But yeah, I'd say it's quite balanced now. I love sitting down and playing piano, and I equally love sitting down and playing guitar. So it's hard to pick and choose. But when it comes to Haken, definitely guitar. It's a lot more practical for me. I always found it tricky trying to play piano, but then think, oh, I've got a guitar solo coming. I've got to somehow change my guitar tone. No. I always used to fail at that. So I think nowadays I just generally focus more on guitar for live stuff and for the albums as well.
Prog per Youngman, he says about this new album, Fauna, he's asking about the cover art and what's the story behind the cover art, which is a fantastic cover. I have to say, it's almost going to be iconic. I'm predicting, that's my prediction. It's a great cover.
Thank you so much. We decided to work with a guy called Dan Goldsworthy for this one, who's an incredible artist. And it turns out he's a huge Haken fan as well, which really helped the whole process. He really understood what we were trying to go for with the music. And I feel like he's reflected the sound and the color and the mood of the music like perfectly with the album artwork. I mean, the album cover itself is a masterpiece, I feel, and there's so much going on. There's loads of Easter eggs in the wallpaper behind the monkey, which kind of reference a lot of our previous albums, which I'm sure all the diehard fans are going to have a lot of fun dissecting. But then when you open the booklet, there's just so many cool pieces in there. It almost feels like every piece is a masterpiece, and you can feel the love that he's injected into the whole process. And we're very lucky to have him on board, and I feel like we'll definitely work with him again in the future.
Daniel Cooper asks, who is your Mount Rushmore of Prog?
Oh, wow, that's a tricky one. It's not as tricky as the Desert Island Disc question. That's a lot harder. I think Gentle Giant are the unsung heroes of that era of prog. That was obviously the golden era of prog, where so many great bands, came and were discovered. So for me, they never quite reached the levels of Yes in terms of how famous and big they were, but in terms of the musicality and the music they created, they're definitely up there. And I love their use of syncopation. They really, like, every part of their compositions has its part. Each instrument is doing something. It may be quite simple, but when you combine all of those simple parts, it creates this like rich tapestry of sound. So Gentle Giant, definitely one. Pink Floyd, they were my dad's favorite band. So that's obviously rubbed off on me. I'm a huge fan. I never got to see Pink Floyd. I saw David Gilmour a couple of times. I saw Roger Waters. I saw the Australian Pink Floyd at the Royal Albert Hall, which was a really cool gig. But unfortunately, I just missed the boat in terms of seeing Pink Floyd. They're up there. Dream Theater. I mean, I have to mention Dream Theater. I mean, they paved the way for a lot of these modern metal progressive bands that are playing now without Dream Theater. Who knows where progressive metal would be right now? It's albums like Awake and Scenes from a Memory that really inspired us to start Haken, and really paved the way for us. I remember just hearing Erotomania for the first time, thinking, well, like, is this even possible? How's he playing that fast? This is like the most insane guitar playing I've ever heard. And that was a real turning point for me as a musician. I really kind of dedicated myself to, being as good as I could be at a guitar at that point. So one more, I'm going to go for a more modern band, Carnival from Australia.
Oh, yes, with a K.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. They're a really cool band. I mean, maybe they're not like overly technical in terms of the way they play, but it's very rhythmic based and focused. And I just love the tones they generate in terms of the bass. And I feel like there's a real kind of locking in of the drums and the bass in that band, which is really forms the basis of their music and the foundation. But yeah, I'm a big fan. If people haven't heard them, go and check them out.
Louis in Fort Lauderdale. He's looking forward to seeing you at the Culture Room with Arch Echo on May 15th. So your tour hasn't started yet, has it?
No. So we're currently setting off for our European tour in 3 weeks' time with Between the Buried and Me. And that's going to be our longest tour to date. And that's going to be a lot of fun. But then we come back and we have a month off. And then we're heading over to America in May into early June. And that'll be our first headline show over there in a long while due to COVID. But yeah, we're joined by Arch Echo, who are an incredible band. Have you heard of those guys?
I have. I've done some reactions and I'm a fan. Yeah.
Oh, insane. Like the proficiency of their playing and it's just insane. Like, I mean, they're going to show us up every night. So it's going to be quite hard to play after them. Yeah, I'm looking forward to just watching them shred on their guitars and bass every night.
You mentioned the COVID thing. Did you guys go off the road for a couple of years during the COVID?
Yeah, we were actually on tour with Devin Townsend at the time when COVID really hit. And we were in America and Donald Trump gave his speech about no planes coming in and all flights being cancelled.
Oh, right. Yeah.
This could be an issue because we're in the country. We need to get home. So the following day, everything was cancelled and we had to somehow work out a way of returning the bus. And we had all of this new merchandise. We had all of our gear that we'd hired. So it was a real tricky logistical nightmare trying to work out all these things whilst also trying to get flights home. And currently at that point, everyone was trying to arrange flights home because it was a nightmare. It took a while. We lost money out of it. And then we came home and we were stuck for 2 years, not really playing any shows. So in terms of the progress of the band, it became a bit stagnant and still. But now it feels great to have a new album, be pushing forward with probably the busiest year that we're going to have ahead of us.
Well, Louis looks forward to seeing you in Florida.
Yeah, it should be fun. Fun.
Joshua Gill asked, what are your thoughts on bands like Swans, Tortoise, Godspeed? So I guess those are all, what's that genre called again?
I don't know any of those bands, unless it's Godspeed, Black Emperor.
Yeah, Godspeed, Emperor. Yeah, that's the one probably.
Yeah,
you know that band?
Yeah, I know those guys. They've been going for years. I'm a big fan. But yeah, I guess that's more focused around the mood and the vibe of the tune and like generally building ideas, which is something I really dig as well. It's we sometimes delve into that approach when writing songs like maybe Bound by Gravity or Red Giant have these big build-ups in them, which is something we've delved into a bit, but I have a lot of respect for, at least.
Like I say, I've got your album here, but I don't know all your catalog yet. Do you have any double albums? You guys ever do any double albums? Well,
that album there, Virus, is part of, you'd call it kind of like a double album, but we didn't release them at the same time. It's Vector and Virus, and they had a narrative that flowed through both albums. So in terms of texture, color and mood, they work well together, and they both lean towards a more metal approach when it came to the writing. So that's as close as we've ever been really to a double album. Yeah, I love the idea of having two albums but are completely contrasting in terms of feel and mood.
And I just mentioned that too because I just did a video about a retrospective video about Yes's Tales from Topographic Oceans, which is a double album. It came out 50 years ago. Are you familiar with that album?
Yeah, I know it well. Yeah, I mean, Yes are a huge influence on us. I'm big fan of those albums. I think my favorite double album would have to be, once again, I don't know whether this was actually released at the same time, but it was Opeth, Deliverance and Damnation. Check those two albums out.
Okay.
That's I think a perfect example of like real contrast. So one of the albums is extreme metal, and the other one is like almost somber acoustic soft playing. I feel those two albums are really impressive as double albums. It's quite tricky to write a double album and make it interesting enough to keep the listener engaged.
The new album Fauna is eclectic, would you say?
I would definitely say it's our most eclectic album, to be honest. It also somehow feels like our most cohesive album, even though there's a lot of different things going on. There's once again, we collaborated a lot on this album, so each of us has a voice in the music. So there's lots of different influences that have been thrown into the bag. We didn't really have much of a filter when it came to the whole process. We just said like whatever goes, any idea goes, whatever you've got, bring it to the table, and we'll see where it goes. And that's, I think, resulted in our most exhilarating album yet. And I love eclectic music. We'll see how it gets received, because some people like more focused writing, when it comes to listening to music. But I've always been a fan of all different styles, and this feels to me like a celebration of all of the stuff that we listen to across the band.
That's interesting that you said it's felt cohesive, even though it's more eclectic than maybe your typical album. That's interesting.
I don't know how it works, but maybe because we spent quite a long time gluing together all of these ideas, which I think has really paid off. And another thing we did during the whole process was we met up in a house that we'd rented in near London, about an hour out from London, and we rented it for a week, and we turned the living space into a makeshift studio, and we spent about 15 to 17 hours there, just kind of gluing together all of these structures and trying to map out all of the vocal themes and ideas together as a band, which is something we haven't really experimented with much in the past, but I feel like that's really helped in terms of the cohesiveness of it.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I really look forward to hearing the whole album, and I got to take my kids to school now, so I have to cut out and
Yeah, you could probably hear my kids in the background as well.
Is that right? Are you in London right now, or are you in America?
No, I'm in London. So
okay.
We're London based. One of us is in Indiana, Connor, the bass player. But the rest of us live in the UK, just around the London area.
Oh yeah, one more thing. I did a react to Nightingale, and it was up for a few hours, and then YouTube blocked it. They wouldn't let me put it up, so I had to put it up on my Patreon page instead. So if there's anyone you can whisper to up in the management, do you watch a lot of reaction videos ever?
I've seen a bunch, yeah, and I find it, entertaining to watch. And it's a real shame, actually, because we're under the banner of Sony. So Sony own Inside Out Records, and they're very strict with their algorithms, and even to the point where sometimes we will do a cover of our own songs, and then it'll get taken down. So we have to kind of whitewash it with the label and stuff. But yeah, maybe if you send an email to the label, that might be an option.
I'll try. Yeah, I'll try.
But yeah, you're right. It kind of stunts the growth of the band in a way, because it's cutting off a lot of potential listeners.
Basically, that's how I discovered you. I started doing reactions to all this new prog, because I'm a fan of the old stuff. That was stuff I grew up with. Had no idea there was so much new prog. And Haken, I consider you guys one of the one of the biggies, like the Yes of now, I don't know
Oh,
if you see yourselves that way, but to me, Haken's kind of like Yes or Rush, one of the biggies. You mentioned Gentle Giant. They kind of didn't explode that way. Although I think in later years, it's catching up. I think there's still a lot of new fans coming out of the woodwork for them.
I'm a big fan. I mean, I hope we can get the same kind of recognition as a band like Yes, because they were huge. But it still feels like we're building the name. But I feel in this era, it's a lot harder for progressive bands to really make a name for themselves, because back then, I guess progressive music was almost as popular as pop music in a way. It was like that was like the main thing that people were into in terms of alternative music.
Yeah.
Whereas now, like, progressive music's almost a dirty word, and it is slowly, rekindling that flame, but it feels almost like an uphill struggle at times.
There's more and more prog reactors on YouTube, so maybe that's a sign too that there's more people who are reacting to prog, and that's going to cause a resurgence of it. Who knows?
It's
I
great
hope
though,
so.
having bands, like Stephen Wilson, Porcupine Tree, Dream Theater, really expanding the genre. That's definitely helping, especially Stephen Wilson over in the UK. He's like branching out into almost pop arenas, which is a huge, and that's definitely helped us, I feel. Hopefully that will continue to grow, but we'll see.
We'll talk to you some other time, maybe. We'll run into you at some point. Who knows?
Nice. Well, hopefully you can come to one of the shows and we'll catch up then, maybe.
I hope so. Thanks, Richard.
See you later.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.